Some encounters with law enforcement are routine, brief, uneventful, and quickly forgotten. Others raise serious questions about authority, rights, and the limits of police power. This is one of those encounters. Welcome to a story where a simple parking situation turns into a prolonged detention, where silence is mistaken for hostility, and where knowing your rights becomes the most powerful tool you have. It was sometime in the fall of 2019. In the quiet city of Millbrae, California, a man named Mac Proctor, an adventurist, YouTuber, and part-time delivery driver, pulled into a private parking lot outside an L&L Hawaiian barbecue. With him was his dog, Bravo. According to Proctor, the stop was quick. Just a couple of minutes to grab a takeout order. His vehicle wasn't blocking traffic. Wasn't causing a disturbance. At least, not in his eyes. But when he returned, something had changed. Waiting for him was a police officer. A San Francisco Police Department K-9 officer. The officer approached Proctor's vehicle, initiating what seemed like a routine interaction. An alleged parking violation. Simple enough. Or so it seemed. By the time the recording begins, the officer had already collected Proctor's identification and vehicle registration. What follows is where things begin to shift. Proctor asks a simple question. Do I have to answer your questions? It's a question many people don't think to ask, but one that sits at the very core of constitutional rights. The officer responds, No, you don't have to answer anything. Legally, that's correct. But then comes something else. A statement. I can stand here all day. What might sound like a casual remark carries deeper implications. Because in the United States, time matters during a police stop. A lot. An officer cannot extend a stop indefinitely. Especially not because someone chooses to remain silent. And yet, that's exactly what begins to happen. Proctor remains calm. Measured. Controlled. He doesn't argue. He doesn't escalate. He simply chooses silence. But silence is often misunderstood. The officer interprets it as attitude, as resistance, even as anger. But here's the reality. Silence is not a crime. In fact, it's a right. A right firmly protected under the Constitution. You are not required to answer questions. You are not required to explain yourself. And choosing not to speak does not give law enforcement the authority to punish you with time. As the interaction continues, the tension grows. Not through shouting, but through something more subtle. Control. The officer begins to slow things down deliberately. Repeating questions. Circling conversations. Holding on to Proctor's documents. Time stretches. Minutes pass. Proctor, still composed, asks a critical question. Am I being detained? The officer answers. Yes. Now the situation becomes something more than a simple conversation. It becomes a detention. Which raises an even bigger question. Why? The justification? A parking violation, but not just any parking violation. One that occurred on private property. And that changes everything. In many jurisdictions, parking rules inside private lots are not enforced the same way as public streets. Unless specific laws are violated, police authority becomes limited. Very limited. Despite this, the detention continues. And then, the situation takes an unexpected turn. The officer shifts focus. Away from parking. Away from traffic. And towards something else entirely. Mental health. He begins asking if Proctor is okay. If something is wrong. Suggesting concern for his well-being. At first glance, it might seem like care. But beneath the surface, it raises serious concerns. Because labeling someone as unstable, especially during a police encounter, is not a small thing. It carries weight. Legal weight. In certain situations, officers can detain individuals for mental health evaluations. But the standard is high. Very high. There must be probable cause that the individual is a danger to themselves. A danger to others. Or completely unable to care for themselves. None of those signs are present here. No threats. No erratic behavior. No danger. Just a man. Standing by his vehicle. Choosing not to answer questions. And yet, the implication lingers. Meanwhile, Proctor doesn't take the bait. He doesn't argue. He doesn't try to prove anything. He simply repeats his position. He does not need to answer questions. And he would like to leave. Time continues to pass. The officer even mentions calling another unit. Just to issue a ticket. For a violation that may not even be enforceable. At this point, the encounter has clearly gone beyond its original purpose. What started as a quick stop has turned into something else entirely. Something slower. More deliberate. More unnecessary. And then, finally, a shift. The officer makes a decision. He returns Proctor's documents. Tells him he's free to go. No ticket. No charges. No further action. Just like that. It's over. Proctor gets back into his vehicle. Starts the engine. And leaves. No celebration. No confrontation. Just relief. Later, the Proctor would explain why he didn't file a complaint. Why he didn't push further. Why he simply walked away. Because in moments like these, the priority isn't justice. It's escape. Ending the encounter, getting back to normal. And that, in itself, says a lot. This wasn't a dramatic arrest. There were no flashing lights. No physical force. No shouting. But that doesn't mean it wasn't important. Because encounters like this happen every day. Quietly. Subtly. In ways that don't always make headlines. This story highlights something critical. The balance of power between citizens and law enforcement. And how easily that balance can shift. When one side controls time. It also highlights something else, the power of restraint. Proctor never escalated. Never lost control. Never allowed emotion to dictate his actions. And in doing so, he protected himself. Because sometimes, the strongest response is no response at all. This wasn't just about parking. Or questions. Or attitude. It was about rights, boundaries, and understanding where authority ends and freedom begins. In the end, no ticket was issued. No crime was proven. No justification remained. Just a long delay. And a lesson about silence. A lesson about patience. And a lesson about knowing when to stand your ground. Without saying a word.